Today we're going to learn how to factor a higher order. We've factored quadratics before, but now notice that we're going to factor degree 3. So we're going to need a different process, and this process is called factor by grouping. So the name is factor by grouping, and sometimes it's called factoring sometimes by parts. So we're going to look at this as two different parts, and what we first want to do is look at the first two terms, and then we will look at the second two terms after we look at the first two terms. So let's look at these first two terms and see if there's anything that is common that we can factor out of those first two terms. And if you notice, both of these have some x's, and they both actually have an x squared that is common. So we're going to factor that x squared out, and remember what we mean by factor out. So there's no common number that's common between the 4 and 5, but the x squared, they both have an x squared. So x squared times what will give us a 4x cubed? That would be a 4x. And x squared times what will give us a negative 5x squared? That will be a minus 5x. Now, if we look at the second term, 4x minus 5, they don't have anything in common, but look, this term and this term are both common. So now what we're going to do is factor out both of those. So if we factor out that both of these have a 4x minus 5, now this first term has the 4x minus 5, but it doesn't have an x squared. So when I multiply through, I'll need an x squared. When I multiply the 4x times something, I want to get this 4x minus 5. So you might not see it, but there's a coefficient here, and that coefficient is 1. So when I factor that out, 4x minus 5 times a 1 will give us this exact term. And this is called factoring by parts or factor by grouping. And your final answer here will be, how does 4x cubed factor? It factors to 4x minus 5 times an x squared plus 1. And it doesn't really matter which term is first, if it was a multiple choice question, or both of these answers are the same thing. So this is a little bit difficult. You can tell from your notes I'm only going to do 4 of these problems, and I will try the next one right now. So when we look at these problems, again, we want to think of these as two separate problems. So we first look at the first two terms, and this time they do have an a common, but they also have a number common between the 16 and the 4. So watch how we factor this out. Both of them have a 4, and they both have an a squared. So I'm going to factor that out. And when we factor out, again, we kind of talk to ourselves. So 4a squared times what will give us a 16a cubed? That would be a 4a. And now this next term has a 4a, so 4a squared times what will give us a negative 4a squared? That would be a minus 1. Now, different than our last example, when we look at these two terms, they don't both have an a, but they both do have a 7 that's common. So when I factor out the 7 here, 7 times what is a 28. That would be a 4. Oh, I need an a. And 7 times what will be a negative 7? That will be a minus 1. Now, this is where that second factoring comes in. Let's take a look at this and see if anything is common between the two of these. And you should see what I mean by common, or what they both have. They both have a 4a minus 1. So we're going to factor that out. And then what's remaining in the second parentheses is what's left. So a 4a squared will go here. The plus 7 will go in the next spot. And again, you can always double check these, because if I were to multiply these two terms together, what should this end up with? It should end up to be the beginning. Number 3, let's think of our steps here. What are our steps? Break it up into 2 pieces. The first piece will be the first 2 terms, and then the next piece will be the second 2 terms. Then what you want to do is factor out what I'm going to call common terms. So in this first example, I see that they both have a 5, and they both have a x squared. What's left? 5 times 5 is 25, and I need an x because I have an x cubed here. 5 times what is a negative 5? That would be a minus 1, and I don't need any x squareds because I have them all. The second part, I'm going to look, is there a common term between a 20 and a 4? Yes, that common term is a 4. So I'm going to factor that 4 out. 4 times what is a negative 20? Oh, maybe I better factor out a negative 4 instead. So if I factor out a negative 4, if I factor out a negative 4 times a positive 5x, because I want these 2 terms to be the same. And a negative 4 times a negative 1 will be a positive 4. Then the third term is, if you've done it right, then there'll be a second term that we can factor out. Okay, so that second term this time is going to be the 5x minus 1. So we rewrite that, 5x minus 1. And then what's in the second set of parentheses is what is on the outside. 4x squared, 5x squared, excuse me, and a minus 4. Try the fourth one by yourself, hit stop, play, and see if you got it correct.